The Carolina Panthers held their first padded practice of training camp on Tuesday morning in Uptown Charlotte. I'll give you my takeaways from day 5 of Panthers camp right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Friday I'll be back once again answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. So either at me or DM me to get your questions in right now for the weekly Friday mailbag. And I mean, right now, do not delay. Get me in those mailbag questions right now at Julian Council on Twitter. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. All off-season long through OTAs, mandatory minicamp, and then once training camp begins, the first few days as they are getting reacclimated before they put on pads, people continuously ask me, hey, what does Bryce Young look like? What's the offensive line look like? What about the new look defense? All of these questions that really, truly cannot be answered until the pads go on. And that's not to say that the work done during OTAs, mandatory minicamp, and the first 4 days of training camp weren't important. They all just set the table for once the pads came on and the real football began. So excited. The Panthers had the pads on throughout the rest training camp leading up to the week 1 of the regular season against the New Orleans Saints down in New Orleans. So on today's show, going to give my takeaways from day 5 of Panthers training camp. Now, unfortunately, unlike the last 3 days, I was not out there for practice, had the other job getting away, unfortunately, but still, I've done this before. It wasn't like I was down there at Wofford all the time, so I can do it the same way I did before and tell y'all what went on and give you my thoughts on all that happened out there on Cedar Street earlier today in Uptown Charlotte. Starting off with Dave Canales and what he had to say, and of course, Bryce Young. Everyone wants to know, Bryce Young, second-year quarterback, new offense, a head coach who did a great job with Baker Mayfield and with Geno Smith. What is he doing with Bryce, and how is Bryce looking? Dave Canales had this to say: nothing changed from yesterday as far as the pads coming on. You put the pads on, and he's still throwing to throw on time. He had a couple of nice completions there. We got a little bit weird on a couple of snaps there at the end of one team period, but we'll be able to fix that part. You know, it's just another step in the right direction. Some play action shots he took, and just seeing him operate, feeling more and more comfortable in our system. And this, if you think about it, aside from getting out there for preseason and regular season, this is the livest it's been for Bryce Young going up against the Panthers defense as they're actually in pads. Like, this is the most closely simulated it's been to an actual game environment for Bryce. That's why I'm actually really excited for that Jets joint practice in a couple of weeks, where you're going to get to see that Jets defensive line to go against this new Panthers offensive line. You're going to get to see Bryce Young go against that secondary. Sauce Gardner, outstanding corner for the Jets. I'm excited to see that happening more so than next week against New England. Not sure how much Bryce is going to play, if he's going to play at all. Also, when it comes to that Jets game later on in the preseason, and then even Buffalo 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, whenever it is, I'm excited to see what it all looks like against New York when it comes to that joint practice and how they're going to simulate things that day. So Bryce Young had some good connections. Going to talk about one of the guys he had connections with on Tuesday morning here in a moment. Looking at the injuries, they shut down Shaq Thompson and Taylor Moton to get some recovery today. Taylor had like a wrap on his leg. Shaq missed Monday with an illness, and I guess there's something else going on with him where he missed again today. Shaq now has not practiced since the back-together Saturday practice inside Bank of America Stadium on Saturday. David Davis went down with a thigh injury in practice on Monday during 1v1s. Dave Canales does not have a timeline but it's going to be a couple of weeks. So that is kind of a timeline, even though he said he did not have a timeline. They signed Tavian Robinson, the undrafted free agent out of Kentucky by way of Virginia Tech, as a guy they can fill out that wide receiver room. They have 13 wide receivers on the roster right now, so a ton of guys getting opportunities, even though we know it's going to be less than half of those guys who will likely make the 53-man roster. Then some of them will certainly be on the practice squad once they have to get those 16 guys. Josh Nijman, he's also still out on the PUP list, and we got an update on what the situation there is. They expect him to be back sometime during training camp, but the Panthers are continuing evaluating him week to week after he had a reinforcement surgery. Reinforcement surgery where? I don't know, but if you are a medical professional and you can enlighten me on what the reinforcement surgery would potentially be, that's the situation there with Josh Nijman. And with him being out, we got to see a little bit of the O-line depth on Tuesday morning. At least folks that were out there got to see that, as Taylor Moton, he was not out there. The guy who would likely be the backup right tackle and even at left tackle, Josh Nijman, he was not out there. And since that's been the case for the first 5 days of training camp, Adara Traore, who would be your third team tackle, he's been playing right tackle with the second team. He got a chance to work with the ones. And we saw this on Monday when I was out there. That was Chandler Zavala, not Brady Christensen, who was filling in for Damian Lewis. I do wonder if this is the regular season, they were actually playing a game, and provided that Zavala and all these guys who we talk about make the roster, would Zavala truly be that first option? I don't think that would be the case. But we see now, Badara Traore, they're keeping him right there at right tackle where he's been working with the twos for the first 4 days of camp. He got an opportunity with the ones. And I was having a conversation the other day with Josh Klein when we were at training camp, and I was just talking about the offensive line and how the last couple of years we have seen an O-line in 2022 that was healthy, with Moton, with Icky as a rookie, with Brady Christensen, with Bradley Bozeman, and with Austin Corbin his first year. They were healthy. They were together. They played well. The only real injury they had all season long was to Pat Elflein, who quite honestly was the weakest link on that offensive line. They were playing fine even when he was out there, but that was the only injury that they had. 2021, you go to that season, Matt Paradis gets injured. You have to put Elflein there in a center spot that gave him an opportunity to even be the starting center. In 2022, you saw the injuries that you had, like Dennis Daly, John Miller. There's a ton of guys who got banged up, and that was an offensive line that really didn't have a ton of talent anyways, but they never were together. And if you don't have guys out there with that continuity, constantly with themselves, you're going to have what you had last season, where 7 different left guards, 8 different right guards, and it's just utter chaos. And they're a lot worse than what they really were. Like, if you tell me last season that the guys from 2022 who all were under contract all came back, they were all healthy last year, to the Panthers play as poorly as they did last season. I don't think that they do as far as the offensive line goes. I don't think they're only a 2-win team last season if they're healthy on the offensive line. Now, again, the run scheme that they ran last season did not necessarily fit the personnel. So they would have still had their issues. I just don't think Ike Ekwonu is as bad as he was last year with Brady Christensen there with him all season long. I don't think Bradley Bozeman is as bad as he was last year. Brady Christensen and Austin Corbett are healthy next to him all year long. I just feel like that was a big reason why this team really struggled last season, among a lot of other things. But you're not going to have success on offense. You're going to be able to run an offense if your line's as bad as it was last year, as we saw. Now, they went out, they spent a lot of money to bring in Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis to fix the offensive line, even though the only thing that really needed to be fixed was those guys staying healthy. And certainly you could upgrade from Christensen. Corbett going to center maybe makes more sense than him being at right guard, even though he's a good player there. You can upgrade in those two positions and really get stronger at center by moving Bozeman out and putting Corbett there. I understand all of that. It wasn't necessarily something that needed to be fixed as far as spending a bunch of money. It was something that needed to be fixed as far as these guys staying healthy and all 5 of them being able to gain that continuity again. And it's good to at least see the depth on this roster. I don't think Badara Traore is the guy who's going to make team. I don't even think Chandler Zavala is going to be a guy that's going to make the team. But it is nice to see that they're getting opportunities with the ones, even if that means just because they are the guy who's playing that role as a backup. And if this was actually a game, that may not be what actually happens. But I did tell Josh when we were sitting there talking to him that I feel like this season, this team is much better equipped to handle an injury. If they lose Robert Hunt, you can put in Brady Christensen, and maybe you're going to have a drop off of that position, but you're not going to be completely terrible like you were last year. If they lose Damian Lewis, you can put, again, Brady Christensen there. If you were to, God forbid, lose Terrell Moton or lose Ike Ekwonu whenever he becomes healthy, you got Josh Nyman, or you can throw Brady Christensen there. Cade Mays, Jalen Zavala, if they both make the roster, they have started games. They may not have played that well. Now, Mays is a lot better than Zavala was, but you have guys with actual experience this year. Last year, Cade Mays had no experience, really, outside of being in an Arby's package the year prior. You looked at Zavala. He was a rookie. Should not have been out there. Now you have guys with experience and an actual backup swing tackle, and another guy can be pretty versatile for you as well. And then maybe even Ricky Lee, someone who the staff really likes. So I look at it. The injuries, you don't like that, but you're getting to see the depth there on the offensive line, which is why I like what this offense can be in the run game, and that Bryce Young should have an opportunity whenever he has to sit into the pocket, which is something he didn't really have last year as far as an opportunity, as far as a chance to actually have success. So that's something that stood out to me as far as what I've seen so far, and also just reading that from Tuesday's practice, rather, that Badara Traore was out there at right tackle. And just another example how there's more depth on this offensive line than there was last year when they really, really struggled. Dave Canales had something interesting to say about the emergency third quarterback and its value, and we'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Back to a few things Dave Canales had to say to the media following day 5 of Panthers training camp, the first padded practice of camp, as they'll move now to FanFest on Thursday evening in Clemson at Memorial Stadium. Please make it down there if you can. I think it's $5 tickets, and I don't even know why I'm saying please make it down there if you can. I guess go support the team. I don't work for the Panthers, so I don't necessarily need to encourage you to go spend the $5, but if you are in the area, if you're someone from the upstate that's upset that it's not there at Wofford, like all of us, and I'm not even from the upstate. I don't even live there. I live here in Charlotte, grew up here in Charlotte, and probably never going to live in the upstate. But still, if you're upset about that, go support the team in Clemson if you can. If you're willing to spend the $5, I think it's kind of crazy that they're charging you. But I guess they're running a business here. Go if you can. And maybe I'll see you out there on Thursday night. But back to what Dave Canales had to say following practice on Tuesday morning. He brought up, or at least he was asked about, Jack Plummer getting a lot of reps there with the third team. And I have seen that as well. Mike Kay, the Charlotte Observer, who's the one who brought it up, that typically you don't see the third team get a lot of opportunities. I'm seeing Jack Plummer throw, I feel like, more than we've really seen any of these quarterbacks in the past get an opportunity to throw during training camp. And Canales was asked him by Alex Zeitlo, also the Observer, if he values the emergency third quarterback. And he said it's invaluable. He brought up examples of last year where teams really were thin and had to bring somebody from outside the building. And he said it really helps if you can afford to have an extra person available for that emergency situation. Y'all, if you've been watching the show for the last year or listening to the show, you know my thoughts on this. I don't see it as being invaluable. There is a value, and it's a roster spot. I believe it's a roster spot that's being wasted. I do, though, agree that if you're going to have that third quarterback, better be someone who's been around all offseason than a guy off the street. My only thing is you never want to see him play anyways. So why waste a roster spot on, if you got to get to that guy, you're screwed. You're not winning the game. They can try to hand the ball off behind this offensive line where you may have a chance, but at some point in time, you're going to have to throw the football. And do you really believe that Jack Plummer is the right guy to do that? If it was a veteran, like Ryan Tannehill, I suppose, was here, I'd be cool with it. I wouldn't be cool with it. I'd still hate the idea, but I would like it more than if it ends up being Jack Plummer as that third guy. He's getting opportunity. He's going to get a ton of reps, I assume, next week against New England. He'll get a lot of reps again against the Jets and then against the Bills. He's going to have an opportunity to show that he's the right guy. I still wonder if then they decide after it's all said and done, late in August, is it time to go outside the building and get a guy who can potentially help them if they do get into what would be a losing situation, getting to your third emergency quarterback? Dave Canales said it multiple times that they valued it. They wanted to bring in a veteran. Then there was talks before the draft that they might draft somebody to be a developmental player along with Bryce Young. And it's been Jack Plummer, UDFA, who's had that spot and still here in late July. Through 5 days of training camp, Dave Canales still sees it as invaluable. I disagree, but it is his team. It's his offense, and we'll see what he and Dan Morgan decide to do. FanFest, everyone on the team, by the way, apparently will be riding the bus down to Clemson. That's going to allow them to have the old camaraderie of being at training camp. Everyone's been asked about it. Bryce's been asked about it. JC's been asked about it as he's having to stay at the Residence Inn right there next to Bank of America Stadium. Just does it feel the same? These guys are happy to be home because they have their locker room. It's the same practice field that they're going to be out all season long. They at least like that part of it. And they're still getting to have those training camp moments. They're going to really get one as there's going to be a bus ride. And it was funny on Saturday after the back together Saturday practice inside Bank of America Stadium, Derek Brown was talking to us and we informed him. Someone asked him, are you going to be, I think it was Joe Person, are you going to be riding the bus? He's like, I didn't know there's going to be a bus ride. And then people were starting to ask him, when was the last time he had a bus ride? And he talked about it was college, had been last time. And at Auburn, of course, they had bus to Tuscaloosa, they bus to Georgia. And it's been a while since he's had to do that. They're going to have a nice old, what, 2:45, I don't know how long Clemson is, but I don't think I've ever driven straight from Charlotte to Clemson. I've been to Clemson a couple of times, but it's been when I've been coming from like Columbia once, and I was coming from Highlands this past year. Went to go see the Heels play them down there in Death Valley. And if I go, I'll finally find out. But they'll have that nice bus ride down there. No one's going to be able to drive their car and sleep in their own bed and all that. They're going to have that team bonding experience on the bus down there to FanFest. That'll be kind of cool to see. A couple other notes from training camp on Tuesday morning with the pads on. Adam Thielen apparently had a strong day, and really it's been Deontay Johnson, it's been Jonathan Mingo, it's been Terrace Marshall. Those have been the receivers that have stood out. And Xavier Legette has had his moments. Like on Monday, they really made a concerted effort to get him the football. Wasn't out there to see, didn't really hear much reports about him. I did see a very interesting video from the SportsCenter Instagram account asking him questions about if he's smarter than a fifth grader. And I'm concerned. That's all I have to say. I'm concerned about that. But the football-wise, I think he'll be fine long-term here in Carolina. But Adam Thielen had a good day. It's good to see that the pads come on, Bryce goes back to all reliable, and Adam Thielen's looking good. Deontay Johnson and Bryce, they're starting to work on that connection. They had that connection again. Mingo's having a strong camp so far. Although, the first 4 days, no pads. But he's having a strong camp. Terrace Marshall, he's showing out finally. To hear all of that it's been a different guy every day, and even some of these guys have been consistent, that is a good sign for this team. Because even if Xavier Legette's not ready to go right now, if Thielen and Johnson are exactly what you expect them to be, and then you're getting more than what I think all of us would expect heading to training camp out of Mingo and Marshall, you don't necessarily need the rookie to be ready right away. Now, yes, you do, because you drafted in the first round, and you don't want it to be another year where a rookie receiver is being a non-factor, especially all that they really have put into, and they haven't thrown him out there. But certainly, that's a guy they want to have as a key part of the offense. And Canales has talked about when he's ready, when he shows us, he'll be out there. And I think he'll get there eventually, that being Xavier Legette. But right now, Thielen, Johnson, Mingo, Marshall, they're ahead of them, and they're showing that the Panthers might have a quartet even without Legette having a big season this year. But I still think he's going to be a big part of this offense. Just an observation of what is surprisingly wide receiver depth here through 5 days of training camp. Fights, they're going to happen. Didn't really seem to happen all that much. There was one moment apparently where Chuba Hubbard got in the face with Devion Clowney, and Icky slid in there in the middle. Cade Mays and Charlie Wooten, they're in the middle of a skirmish between the offense and the defense. Dave Canales was asked about this after practice, what his message is to the team. Is he anti-fighting? How does he feel about it? He said, my message is we have to practice hard. We have to be able to bring everything we got between the whistles. We got to have the hitting. We got to have guys getting out blocks the right way. We got to have the physical nature of our play to be able to make our team figure out who can do what. We also got to handle the flip side of it. But on the echo of the whistle, we have to get our minds wrapped back around what's best for the team once that play is over. So being smart. And remember, this was the most penalized team in the National Football League last year. Looking at all the things that went wrong last season, just blows my mind that they were as undisciplined as they were under Frank Reich. Really is unacceptable for any team to be that undisciplined at the National Football League level. Now, somebody's going to have the most penalties. That's going to happen. But the procedural penalties, the Seattle game was a complete embarrassment. And Reich talked about how unacceptable it was, yet that stuff continued throughout the season. And a big reason, among other things, why he's no longer the head coach here. Good to hear Dave Canales talk about, I want to see that physicality. We need to figure out who we are and who can do what, but also think about the team. Be smart, be disciplined, play fast, be physical, but no nonsense at the end of the day. Harrison Mevis, he looked kind of down yesterday, but he bounced back in a big way today on Tuesday as he made all 7 of his field goal attempts, including 2 and 2-minute drills. That's from Mike K, the Charlotte Observer. 3 for 5 on Saturday, 7 for 7. Eddie Pinheiro made all 5 that I saw on Monday morning. The kicker competition, is it back? Maybe. I still don't think there should be one, but apparently there is one. And Robert Hunt, he spoke to the media along with Bryce, and we hear from Bryce so much that it feels all monotonous. It's the same kind of stuff every single day. People are asking him. But Robert, he was asked about Austin Corbett moving to center and what he's thought about that. And he said that he would have believed that Corbett was the center all along. And he discussed that he's done a really good job communicating and getting the line set up. And that is good news to hear. And Austin, he spoke to us on Saturday as well. And he was asked about the knee injury and coming back. He's like, that's overblown, guys. Like, I play football. I'm fine. Like, we don't need to worry about it. The meniscus, it's not that big of a deal. And he also kind of thinks to move the center. It's kind of a little overblown. So what's not overblown anymore? Austin Corbett, according to Robert Hunt, looks like he's been playing center all his life. And also was asked about practicing against Derek Brown. He said he'll get me better. And I can only imagine that iron sharpens iron in those situations. You have to think, too, like Derek Brown, he is already dominating with a poor interior defensive line. Now he's got a really good interior defensive line, at least one I think is certainly should be above league average. How much better is it going to make him? Pro, all pro. I think that could happen this year in Carolina. One thing that will not happen this year in Carolina is Rashaad Penny playing for the Carolina Panthers, as he will be retiring for the NFL. That came out on Tuesday morning. We'll talk about what impact, if there's any impact at all, that has here on the Panthers here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop with the playoffs over. We're getting fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But you know what? They kind of are, because the Olympics are going on right now in Paris. We got Major League Baseball still going on. There's a preseason game on Thursday night. Football, it's not back. Not totally back, but it is almost back. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want, whether there is football or there's the Olympics or nothing going on at all. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the move. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. The Panthers announced on Tuesday morning, shortly after practice began, that Rashaad Penny would be retiring from the NFL. Dave Canales was asked about that after practice, saying that he brought Penny in, hoping that he could get him back to his best when they saw him in Seattle, and it made sense. A team that's going to focus on the run, that really values running backs, coaching staff that had a relationship with Penny would want to bring Penny into Carolina to help out the team. But when you already had, I don't even remember when did Penny come. I think Penny came after the draft. So when you already had Chuba Hubbard as your number one guy, you drafted Jonathan Brooks and Miles Sanders was here. I was always pretty skeptical of whether he was actually going to make the roster. So you're going to have a guy who's going to be your fourth running back. He's going to need to play special teams. And I did see over the last couple of days when Penny was out there, he was returning punts. He was a part of special teams in that fashion, but he wasn't the top guy. It was Amir Smith-Marset ahead of him. It was Devin Tompkins, who just came here from after being a free agent from Tampa. He was ahead of him. We even saw Miles Sanders out there ahead of him. Oh, Deontay Johnson. There was a ton of guys, you name it, that were out there ahead of Rashaad Penny in those certain situations. And Penny told Dave Canales after practice yesterday that he just didn't feel like himself anymore and that it was time to hang it up. And it is unfortunate. This is a guy who had immense talent coming out of San Diego State, had a ton of knee injuries, just injuries in general, and just never could be what the Seahawks hoped he could be. And that's a situation, I think, maybe much like what the Panthers will be moving forward under Canales if he does have success, where if you're running back, that's where you want to go. Pete Carroll, defensive guy, wanted to run the football. With Marshawn, they ran the football. With God, what was his name? I can't even remember all the backs they had recently. Chris Carson, right? They ran the football. That's what they wanted to do. And here in Carolina, they want to run the football. So Jonathan Brooks, he talked about how he's excited to be here because of the plan they had for him when it comes to his rehab. He also has to be excited because of the plan that they have for him long-term being their featured back. So for Penny, just did not work out for him. Hate to see it for any player. And really, this shouldn't come as much of a shock. When looking at him, he was remarkably out of shape, y'all. Truly was. And I don't want to sit here and talk bad about the guy, but he was not in game shape. And he doesn't necessarily need to be in game shape. He just was not in football shape. And that probably goes into it. When you get to the end of it, when you had all the injuries and different scenario, but Andrew Luck talked about he was tired of doing the rehab. He loved the game. He had kind of fallen out of love with the game, but he's just sick of doing all the rehab. And guys get to that point where and JJ Watt said this, it's the difficult part is not necessarily playing the games, it's all the things you have to do once the season ends, leading up to the beginning of the season, all the work you have to put in, all the time and the effort, the energy. That's what difficult. And you could see just looking at Rashaad Penny that he didn't put in the time and the effort and the energy that's needed for him to be able to play in the NFL and be able to make this team. And that's unfortunate. His best chance is going to make the team on special teams. And you got to play a player like Raheem Blackshear, who's likely to be that fourth guy. Like Hubbard, Sanders, Blackshear, those were the only running backs I was looking at that are clearly on the roster. Of course, Jonathan Brooks, whenever he's active, will be on the roster. I didn't see much of a way for Penny to make it. And do you really want to be on a practice squad, or would you actually want to be on a 53 and be a part of the team? And didn't feel like himself. So he moved on, and I guess that's the right decision for him. And I don't even want to say it's the right decision for the Panthers. I think the Panthers are going to make the decision down the road that he was not going to be on the active roster and maybe not even on the practice squad. I guess they probably would have kept him around because of the Seattle ties. But hate it for him. Really do. Wish him the best and thank him for his time, although brief, here in Carolina. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Friday, I'm back once again to answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions and get those questions into me right now at Julian Council over on Twitter. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole as always, and forever keep pounding in on Thursday. Hopefully I'll have somebody who was over at practice on Wednesday, and we can just chop up our week 1 training camp thoughts on the Panthers. So that will happen here on tomorrow's show on Locked On Panthers.